welcome you today to Shirleen's Biblical Kitchen. We're going to be making a Christmas Stollen. I love Christmas Stollen, and I know a lot of you probably do too, but we're going to make it just a little bit healthier. We're only going to use dried fruit, not the citron, not the candied cherries, because we're going to use a combination of fruits that I've already mixed up here. You chop everything up. You can see that a little bit. It's chopped up pretty small pieces, not tiny, but pretty small. And I've got a half a cup of apples, dried apples. These are all dried fruits. Dried apples, a half a cup of dried apricots. I have a fourth a cup of dried raisins. I dehydrate my own fruit, so I dehydrate my own raisins too, but you can use bought raisins. I have a half a cup of dried cherries. I did not dehydrate those, I had before. And I've got a tablespoon of the zest of a lemon and 3/4 cup of orange juice that I squeezed. And I'm going to let these soak overnight. So I'll put saran wrap on this and they'll soak overnight. I've got 170 grams of hard white wheat. I'm going to mill it in just a minute. If you take 170 grams, then it'll make 170 grams of flour. You don't have flour left over that way. I'm also using half bread flour. It makes a fluffier stollen, and you can make it with all hard white wheat. It's just going to be a little bit different. But I like to use half bread flour. I buy unbleached organic, and that's 170 grams, or it's a cup and a half. But take your flour, because it's bought flour, and stir it with a spoon and shuffle it into your cup if you don't do it by grams. Grams are always best. A cup of warm water here, and 2.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast, which I'm using today. A lot of times I use instant yeast. I've got 3/4 cup of lukewarm milk. You bring it to just scald it. You really have to watch it, you'll burn it. But just bring it to a barely boil and turn it off, take it off the heat and let it cool to lukewarm. So that's kind of our mixture here. I'm going to move these aside. I'll tell you what we have here. We've got a teaspoon of salt, a half a cup of chopped almonds, and I had the slivered almonds already slivered, and I just chopped them up in little pieces. I've got 1 egg. I've got 1/4 cup of lard. Now, let me tell you about lard. This is about a 100-year-old recipe, and they used lard back in those days. And of course, back in biblical days, they would have used lard. They would have used many of these fruits in their baking because they had a lot of fruits available to them. And so they would have had apples and grapes and things like that. Pretty certain they would have dried some of those fruits. And then we have a 1/4 cup of sugar. I have 2 tablespoons of potato flour. Not the starch, but the flour. These are guides. The recipe is a guide when it comes to the flours. I keep my flour separate. I'll grind my hard white wheat. Then I'll only add enough, and I'll add my potato flour in with the hard white wheat. Then I'll add my whatever I need of the bread flour. Depends on the temperature in your house, the conditions of the flour, the conditions, how much humidity. We're just going to mix this up until it pulls away from the sides of the mixing bowl, or by hand pulls away from the sides of your bowl. It'll be tacky, but not sticky so much. Even though this is a little bit of a sticky dough, but it won't be as sticky. I'll show you all those steps. But making bread is an art. We have our 170 grams of hard white wheat. With my meal, it's a mock meal. You can have any kind of meal you want that grinds cream, but you want one that grinds it pretty fine. And you really don't want to grind a lot more than you need if you're grinding it. Now, you can just buy hard white wheat. You can buy whole wheat. You can buy different kinds of grains in flours nowadays. So I would turn on my meal. You follow your meal's instructions, and I'll just pour it in. So I have my bread flour, and I have my fresh milled hard white wheat. I'm going to use this one first, and we'll dump that in there with our potato flour, and then we'll use this first. Your flour will keep your bread soft when you're using whole grains especially, but it really does make a big difference in your whole grain bread. So we're going to mix up our liquid ingredients. My nuts in my hand. The fruit will refrigerate overnight. This dough is going to rise one time, and then we're going to cover it and refrigerate it overnight. Then the next day we can come back and put our bread together, let it rise, and bake it. So if you have a holiday, you can do a lot of your prep work the day before. Okay, to make our bread, and I have a big, it's more of a professional bread mixer. A lot of people are getting the Akershams nowadays. They're really, really heavy duty. You can mix 6 loaves of bread at one time. My machine may look different than yours. If you're using a less powerful machine, now this is not a real hard dough. You can do it by hand, but just make sure you don't overheat your motor. If you think it will, just mix the liquids in there and then knead in your flour by hand. That works too. So we're going to put in our milk, put in our egg, our yeast. It's already been activated. If you're using instant yeast, again, just put it in. I'm going to put in our sugar. I'm going to start this. This is well mixed other than the lard. It's not well mixed in there, but it's okay. It'll mix in with the flours. We're going to add in our hard white wheat first, and it has the potato flour in it. It's going to make a really soft bread. The lard will make a soft bread too. Then we're going to mix it, and we'll add in only enough until this pulls away from the sides of the bowl, the mixing bowl. When the dough pulls away, then it should pass what we call a window pane test, and I'll show you the window pane test. When it pulls away from the sides of the bowl, you don't add any more flour. Up until that point you can, but after that you can't. So I may or may not use all of this white bread flour. It just depends. Depends on a lot of factors. No, it's pulling away a little more. It's not pulling away completely. I could add up to another tablespoon of flour. Everything is sort of mixed together. The dough is still going to be very sticky. The feel of it is sticky. But we're going to cover it and let it set about 10 minutes. With whole grains, even though there's only part whole grain, it's best that bran will absorb slowly. It doesn't absorb like regular flour because it does have bran in it, which makes it healthy. But we're going to cover it with a towel for about 10, maybe 15 minutes. Dough will start developing gluten without you doing anything. So letting it rest, whether you're doing this by hand or in a mixer, letting it rest 10 or 15 minutes once it's mixed up, then we'll come back and knead it. It's pulling away from the sides of the bowl, so I'm not going to add more flour. I did add all that we had in the recipe in one kind of a big tablespoon, heaping tablespoon, I guess. Not real heaping, but a little bit. So we're going to let this rest, and then we'll come back and look at it. We are ready to add our fruit and our nuts to our dough, and then we're going to shape it into the stollen. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do a stollen, but I've got a way that I like, but I like the other way too. But I'm only going to do the one today. Another day we might do more of a German stollen. This is more what I call an American stollen, I guess. A German stollen is sort of long shape. We're going to do this in a half moon shape. I'll show you. But first, you want to drain your fruit. I took this out this morning. It had little to no juice draining. But had it had juice, you want that drained out. Our dough has been setting out, a couple hours anyway. It's kind of warmed up. It's not quite room temperature, but it's warmed up. It's still cold, but it's okay. And because this dough is a little sticky and we're going to put wet fruit in it, a lot of times I use oil or water on my counter, but because of the wet fruit, I'm going to just dust it with a light dusting of flour. Put our dough on here, and we'll just kind of pat it out. I'll move this out of the way. And I'm just going to dust this. You just kind of throw your flour, you just lightly dust it, and that's all you want. We're going to make this into a oblong, about a 12 by 10 anyway. Since we're doing the fruit first, we can just do the oblong shape. After that, we'll do a round shape. So we'll get this done first. I think I will use my little rolling pin. Just put some flour on it, just to make it a little faster. All we're doing is flattening out the surface so we can get that fruit, or they call them inclusions. Any kind of inclusions. I like to do them this way. I have done them where you just mix it in with the mixer. but they don't distribute very evenly. And pretty soon your bread's got all the fruit here. It's just not distributed well. And other pieces don't have any fruit or nuts. This is a lot easier to distribute the fruit and the nuts. So I'm just going to take this, put it on. We don't want any of that liquid on there. If you see that, I'm going to set that aside. And we're going to spread our fruit and nuts out all the way to the edges. And kind of evenly distribute it. But you want to get those edges because that's the dough that you want every piece, if possible, to have fruit and nuts in it, obviously. And our almonds in here too. I've already cut those up. Half a cup of chopped almonds. And we'll just spread those out with our fruit and nuts. With our fruit, it's fruit and nuts now. Let's just kind of mix that all up a little bit. It looks like a lot of fruit, but this is a Stollen has a lot of fruit, and I like a lot of fruit in it. You know, some people complain about fruit cakes, but if you make a good fruit cake, they can be good. But I do fruit cake or fruit cookies the same way I do this. I'm going to use real dried fruit, and I'm not going to buy that citron. If you use orange peel in this, some people do, make it orange peel yourself, because what you buy is really bitter, and it won't be good. Now you can make these with an almond paste in them. That's another story. We can do that another day. Now this is pretty spread out. And all I'm going to do, just roll it up. Get every piece in there. Roll it up. And roll it up on the ends. And we're just going to mash it all together. And we're going to just kind of work it in. So we want it all worked in that dough. Just kind of squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it. If it falls out, put it back in. This dough is really soft and just really good to work with. Now all you're doing is incorporating that fruit into that dough. If it makes it a little wet, just dust it with a little bit of flour and work it in. But not too much. Flour will make your bread tough if you add extra flour. But if it's too wet from the fruit, you may have to add a tiny bit. I'm going to dust this again because it looks pretty wet. Just let that set a minute and kind of relax and absorb that fruit. Put just a little flour on this side too. Again, just dust it on and just give that time to absorb. I'm going to let it rest. Kind of round it out and shape it up a little. I'm going to let it set about 5 minutes. Okay, it's been 5 minutes and the bread's it's just not as sticky on those wet spots as it was. So we're just going to take it, shape it up a little bit and kind of drag it. See all these wrinkles on the bottom? We want to pinch those together. And we want to kind of put those in. There's a little fruit down there and put a little flour. And just kind of shape it up. A nice shape. Now we're going to actually work on rolling it out. I'm going to still dust that. And we're going to take this and we're going to roll this out into a pretty good sized circle. I'd say about 12 inches anyway. I got my bigger rolling pin. I'm going to use it. It'd be a little bit easier. And again, where you see that fruit coming through, if it's too much of a mess, too sticky, just dust the tiniest bit of flour on it. Because it's full of fruit and nuts. Flour on the bottom, at least a little bit. I wouldn't use water because, again, it's already wet from the fruit. But you want that flour so you can get this up onto your pan. Now we could roll it down on parchment. In fact, that's not a bad idea. Then it's easier to get to your pan, but I believe we can make it work. It is 12 inches and about 11, so we'll spread it out just a little more here, make it 12. Just a 12-inch round circle. Make it as round as you can. And I'll take my pan. I'm going to roll this in not exactly half, but just kind of a moon shape. Didn't get it quite far enough. A little wet there. You can always dust that flour and then you can just let that set a minute. Little piece there coming out. Just brush that flour off. But you don't want that too wet. Sit on your counter. So I'm going to turn this around so you can see it better. See how it's moon shaped? It's half moon shaped. And then this is not all the way to the edge. Just leave about a ½ inch. And that's your stollen right there. This is pretty wet here on top. And I'm going to dust it. And I'll tell you why, because it's going to be too wet if we don't. Normally you don't keep dusting your bread like that, but when it's got a lot of wet fruit in it, you may have to. And with the flour under there, I can easily lift that onto my board. There it is. That's our stollen. I like to kind of even it up there to make sure it's kind of all the same thickness. And that's it. We're going to cover this. I'm going to oil a piece of plastic wrap and then lay that on the top. That way it won't stick. You can see a lot of fruit coming out there. And some of that fruit, if you're not careful, that will burn on you. So we may try to poke that down in there a little bit better and seam it up. And we may have to pick some of it off if we can't get it all in there. That's okay. These are pretty much in there. This spot down here is a lot of fruit on the top. I'm going to pick some of that off and just stick it underneath. Because what's on the top there could burn on us. We don't want that. We may just have to pick some of it off. I like to pick it off though a little earlier, like now. Scrape it off with my finger and put it underneath. That way we're not getting rid of it. But I don't want to leave it laying on that top either. So we're going to do that. No, and mash it down. It's going to all be good. It's going to all be good. We'll be back. Our stollen has risen. The way you can tell if your dough has risen, poke 2 fingers into it, and I'm going to do it down here so it won't be 2 finger holes in my top. But if you poke in with your 2 fingers and the dough does not pop right back out, if it pops right back out, it's not risen enough. If it deflates the whole thing, it's over risen, and that's not popping right back out. So this stollen is ready to bake. I've got a little slit here with, I'll push that back just a little bit. You really want to keep that fruit covered up as much as you can, but don't play around with this too much. It's already risen. It needs to go in a 375 oven for about 35 to 45 minutes. Internal temperature on bread, use a digital thermometer is what I use and stick in it. Should be 190, 195 to 200. Okay, I have put a glaze on the cake while it was still very, very warm, so it would just sort of glaze it all over. Then I put another glaze to make it thicker because you want enough thickness. And I just sprinkled a little powdered sugar. Stollen just looks so, so, so good. You can see the shape here, the half moon shape. Now what I'm going to do to really finish this off and make it really pretty, and this will make a mess on the counter, but that's okay. I'm still going to sprinkle and dust it with that powdered sugar. The glaze just gives it that extra sweetness. Some people put butter. I didn't really want to put butter on it. I'd rather put the powdered sugar. Dusted some pecans, and we're just going to dot those on there. There's our stollen. You know, bread, you don't cut into it when it's hot, so this is cooled about 45 minutes. This is just amazing, amazing bread. And it will keep a day or two, or you can freeze it. That texture on that, it's soft on the inside. Smells amazing with all that fruit, those apples and apricots and cranberry, cherries and raisins, and it's just wonderful, wonderful bread. Just love that it's still warm. It's not hot, but I love that fruit in there. The almond flavor from the, with the orange juice, we put some almond and vanilla in with the fruit. You just try this bread. You're going to love it. Wonderful, wonderful bread. This bread, I believe you're going to love it for a brunch, for a holiday, or just when you want to have it.